We hear it all the time, Jack. I'm sorry. Like, that's supposed to make everything all right.
Right.
But what about when it's, like, really serious? You know, when someone breaks your trust. How do you ever really come back from that? That's what I want to unpack today.
Yeah.
We're diving into the idea of forgiveness, like real forgiveness, not just brushing things under the rug. And we've got this article from thickshades.com that's got some seriously thought-provoking stuff.
It really does. One of the first things that jumped out at me was the difference it makes between God's love, which they say is unconditional, versus this act of forgiveness, especially between people.
Okay, so God might love us no matter what, but that doesn't equal a free pass on messing up.
Exactly. And it makes sense if you think about your own life, right? You can love someone, care about them deeply, but if they totally betray you, there's got to be more than just, oh, it's cool.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, the kind that actually puts things back together, it needs more than just warm, fuzzy feelings.
So it's like the love might still be there, even with a friend who, like, really screws up.
Yeah.
But that trust, to get that back, that's a whole other thing.
Totally. That rebuilding, that's where it gets interesting. The article brings up Luke chapter 17, verses 3 and 4.
Okay.
Which, I know, Bible stuff, but even if you're not into that, stick with me, because this part is super relevant.
Okay.
It doesn't just say forgive, forgive, forgive all over. It's like, if he repents, then you forgive.
So there are conditions. Just feeling bad, that's not enough.
No, not at all. There's got to be more than just, whoops, my bad. The word they use is repentance, which in this case means actually changing. Like, you realize you did wrong, you turn away from doing it again, and you make an effort to fix things. It's action, not just feeling bummed out.
Okay, so then they talk about rebuke, and I gotta say, that word always throws me off a bit. Seems kind of harsh, doesn't it? Are we supposed to, like, scold the people we're trying to forgive?
I get why you'd think that. It sounds kind of intense, right? But the way they use it here, it's more about confronting the problem, but with love. Not to be all vengeful, but to be real, you know? To speak the truth, because you actually want things to get better.
So you're saying it's more about fixing what's broken, not just sweeping it under the rug and pretending it never happened.
Exactly. And then, to make it practical, they bring in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17. It's basically like a step-by-step guide for dealing with these situations.
Interesting. So this passage, even if we're not talking religion, it's like a guide to addressing wrongs in any relationship.
That's how they present it. Think about it. How many times have you wished you had some kind of clear process for dealing with a conflict, right? This gives you that.
Okay, so how does it work? What's the first step?
It starts with talking directly to the person, just one-on-one. Give them a chance to make things right privately. If that doesn't work, then there's a system for bringing in other people, kind of like mediators. But even with all that, the goal, if the person is truly sorry and changing their ways, is to reconcile, to repair the relationship. And that emphasis on fairness throughout the process for both people involved, I thought that was really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we've all gotten those apologies that sound totally empty.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can tell the person's just saying it because they have to. But when someone actually backs up their words with actions, that's when you know they're serious. There's that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And it's not just a human thing. Even in, like, spiritual matters, that idea is there. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9 talks about how even with God, we have to admit we messed up if we want forgiveness.
It's like we have to own our mistakes, not just expect to be let off the hook without doing any of the work.
Right. It's not about getting off easy. True forgiveness, it's a big deal, and everyone's got to play their part.
This whole conversation is making me rethink things, honestly. Forgiveness. It's not like a light switch you just flip on and off. It's more like a journey, you know?
It is a journey, isn't it? And like any journey, it's not always easy. There are going to be bumps along the way.
And that's where grace comes in, I guess.
Yeah.
We mess up. We need others to cut us some slack.
Yeah.
And when they mess up, we've got to do the same for them, right?
Exactly. And that doesn't mean you're saying, oh, what you did was no big deal. It's more like you acknowledge the hurt that was caused, but you leave room for growth. Because people can change. We all can, right?
It's like this balancing act almost. Holding someone accountable, but also being open to the possibility that they can become a better person.
It is a balance, because if you're not willing to extend grace, you just end up stuck. Resentful, bitter. It sends the message that people can't change, which honestly is kind of depressing.
And honestly, expecting someone to be totally over it immediately after, like a betrayal or a really deep hurt, I mean, that's just not realistic, right?
Absolutely not. And that's where I think this idea of forgiving yourself comes in.
Oh, interesting.
We talk about getting forgiveness from others, But sometimes the hardest person to forgive is actually ourselves.
That's so true.
We can be so hard on ourselves, holding on to guilt and shame way longer than we need to.
It's like we get so focused on whether the other person deserves forgiveness that we forget how much it's hurting us to hold on to all that anger.
It's true. And that's why I think this whole conversation is so freeing, you know? Forgiveness, it's not a transaction. It's not like you owe someone. It's about your own healing.
So you're saying, in a way, forgiveness is kind of selfish? In a good way,
Maybe. Because it's about you taking control of your own peace.
which I'm guessing is probably its own journey too.
Absolutely. It takes time to process those tough emotions, hurt, anger. You have to work through it all in a healthy way. And that's okay. Rushing the process doesn't help anyone.
So it seems like there's a lot more to forgiveness than we realize. It's not simple at all.
Not at all. It's not about just saying the words or even forcing yourself to feel a certain way. It's about recognizing that something went wrong, setting boundaries, and then leaving space for things to actually change in yourself and the other person.
And remembering that everyone makes mistakes, sometimes big ones, but there's always a way back to each other if both people are willing to put in the effort.
Yes, exactly. We're not perfect. Any of us. We all mess up. And we can all learn from those mistakes, become better because of them.
That's a good reminder, giving ourselves and each other that grace, acknowledging that we're all a work in progress. I love that. It makes forgiveness feel less like, I don't know, a chore or something, and more like an opportunity.
Absolutely. Relationships are messy. People are complicated. But even when things are broken, there's always that chance for healing, for growth, for something really special to come out of it all. And honestly, that's a beautiful thing, don't you think?
It really is beautiful. And it brings us right back to what we started talking about, forgiveness. It's about coming to it with open hands, but also with your eyes wide open.
Right.
It's not about letting people walk all over you or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about understanding just how powerful real forgiveness can be.
Exactly. You have to honor what everyone's going through, those boundaries they have, and then you make space for real change to happen.
And maybe, and this is just a thought, but maybe understanding it this way, like there are these steps to real forgiveness, maybe that makes it more meaningful. Because it's not something you just toss around, right?
Right.
It's a choice.
Yeah.
This deliberate thing you do because you want to rebuild something important.
That is so insightful, honestly, and it makes you think about how you approach forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Are we demanding it too soon, maybe because we just want to avoid the awkwardness of it all? Or are we holding on to it, that anger and stuff, like it's protecting us from something? Or are we actually trying to forgive in this deep way, knowing it can change things, not just for them, but for us too? Whoa. Those are some heavy questions. Something to really think about. And this whole conversation, honestly, this article from thickshades.com, it's given us a lot to unpack. Forgiveness, it's not just this nice idea, it's a process, an active thing we have to work at.
It's a journey, that's for sure. But it's one worth taking because it leads to something good. For us as individuals and for our relationships with the people around us, it reminds us that even when things are tough, really disappointing, we can still grow from that, understand each other better, maybe even find redemption.
And that's a hopeful way to look at it. So to everyone listening, as you navigate these, let's be honest, sometimes messy and complicated, but ultimately beautiful relationships in your life, I hope our deep dive today has given you a new way to think about forgiveness, what it really means and what it can do. Thanks for joining us.